Hey guys, Pat here. This is my 20 favorite films of all time list, and we're on number 14. Man, I know it's been taking a really long time for me to finish this up, and I've been kind of dragging it out, but that's because I've been really busy with other videos, and I'm trying to start some new stuff and reformat the channel. So I just haven't had the time to focus on the series anymore, but we're almost in the top 10, and that's going to be really exciting. So, what's my 14th favorite film of all time? This was a tough one because so far I've been kind of playing with coming of age films and nostalgia films and sci-fi. Pulp Fiction was a crime film. I've kind of jumped around in genres, but they've been pretty adult films for the most part. Certain type of movie. This is going to be the first animated film on the list. It won't be the last. But it's certainly one of my favorite animated films of all time, and with that, it's also one of my favorite films of all time, and that would be Walt Disney's 1940 Fantasia. Fantasia, when it first came out, it had this roadshow release where they took it across the country with like a live orchestra, and it actually got like mixed reviews and didn't do very well at the time because it was in a very expensive movie. They spent over $2 million on it. So, cut to years later, they re-release it in the '60s, and then it does huge with the '60s drug crowd, like psychedelics and stuff like that. They even had posters that said "Blow Your Mind" at Fantasia. With that, the film's reputation grew. Now it's considered one of the greatest animated films of all time, a landmark achievement from Disney Studios with Snow White, and today many people just praise it like it deserves to be praised. So for me to praise it, it would be saying a lot of the stuff that's been said about the technical achievements for the time, how groundbreaking it is, not just in animation but in ambition, how it influenced the music video. I mean, this film's quite an achievement in many ways, but I'm going to try to talk more about what Fantasia is for me and why I like it so much. And it's not going to be from some like, hey, I got high a bunch and watched Fantasia and it blew my mind, or overpraising the ambitious nature of it, the abstract nature of it that people just love to just give so much credit to. For me, Fantasia went back to childhood. It was first shown to me in school, like a lot of people, and I was kind of fascinated right away. I was learning that I actually had a love for classical music from a very young age, and animation, which it didn't really occur to me at the time, but it became apparent to me later. I was having these things were having a big impact on me. So I see Fantasia several times as a kid. I've always seen I sometimes I'd see the version that was shorter, like 90 minutes, that didn't have the musicians and stuff like that. So a lot of time went by, and I always thought, man, I really liked that movie, and I started watching it again as a teenager, and then I started watching it more and more, and then I realized I'd seen Fantasia like 30 times, if not more, and every time I watch it, it's this overwhelming sensory experience. It's a sensory overload of so many things. In particular, the first 20 minutes to a half hour. Fantasia definitely has a lull in the middle, and there's some of the parts that aren't as good. There's definitely sequences in Fantasia that don't hold up, and I do think could probably be cut, and they wouldn't hurt the movie very much. And I hate to say that because I love this movie, but there's a couple things I think could have just be gone and they wouldn't affect the movie at all. But let's not harp on the flaws, okay? There's some slight pacing issues, and maybe a couple of the segments aren't as good as the other ones. And perhaps there is a slight lull in the middle, and they spend a lot of time on those dialogue exchanges with all the people working in the orchestra and stuff like that. But I really have no issue with that stuff. It's beautifully shot, and I love the lighting of it and the way it interacts with the animation. Like when Mickey shows up, it's so well done because it's done with silhouettes. Man, Fantasia, man, it's such a great idea. Let's strip down all the ideas we have of narrative and conventional storytelling and what we were developing somewhat with the Disney brand. These classic stories that people could follow that went back to great traditions in literature. Fantasia is a whole different concept altogether. It's an animator's film. And an animator's film is a term that's used when a film's pretty much done by the animators, where it's more of an animation piece than it is a film that comes from a very strong screenplay or other elements that make a movie what it is or a TV show what it is. It's just something where the animators really get to do their stuff, just with the artwork, just with the way that the animation moves and the stories told through their imagination. This doesn't happen too often with movies. Most of the time, an animator has to service the script and the story being told. A lot of the time, they're given a job and they do it. Even very creative, innovative animators, they still try to stick to a lot of basic structures and things we know. They don't just go crazy with their artwork, and that can lead to very indulgent, boring, animated work. You certainly find a lot of short films that might have that issue. Fantasia doesn't suffer from any problem with this really, outside of the pacing issues mentioned, because it's so raw. Like when Fantasia starts, you're kind of just thrown into it, and at first you're not necessarily understanding what it is. You're like, okay, so it's a film with classical music, and they're going to play it over animation and match it up, and they pretty much explain that to you, but you're not totally sure how that's going to play out. Then you get that first 5, 10, 15 minutes, and it feels like a dream that you've had has come to life and is being shown to you. And not only is it being shown to you, it's somewhat being interpreted for you. The music gives context to the images, and the images are giving all this weight and depth to the music. They beautifully complement each other in almost every choice. So when you're watching Fantasia and you're seeing it as a spectacle, you're in your head, you're trying to give meaning to it. You're trying to give structure to it, some coherence. You're trying to project your own feelings and your own whatever you're going through at the time. What I find interesting about this movie in comparison to a lot of other films is that the mood you're in when you watch Fantasia really affects how you perceive the film. Like outside of Mickey's storyline with the wizard and the brooms and all that. That one's pretty straightforward. It's a short film. You can follow it rather easily. A lot of the other parts, they're up to interpretation in a way that other Disney films aren't. And since this film, Disney films really haven't been like. It doesn't follow. I mean, it's more of an art film than anything. It's like pure expression, and that's what I love about it so much. And I don't mean that in like a pretentious way, like, oh, I don't like regular animated films, because I love the traditional animated films. I'm a big fan of the Disney Renaissance and Cinderella and Sleeping Beauty and Pinocchio and all that. But man, Fantasia's like a whole other beast on its own, because it's a wave of things coming at you, like just waves. Like you're sitting there in the ocean and you're relaxed, and then another wave comes, and it never stops. The momentum never really lets up, and it's got this amazing, dark, beautiful, haunting third act. But Disney's constantly throwing everything at you. It truly is Fantasia. I mean, it's trying to give you this sense of a nirvana almost, because it's so phantasmagorical. There's so much happening, really, and you can make it either the greatest film in the world in your mind or a total piece of junk. Like that's what's so amazing about it. It's really up to the viewer how they want to see Fantasia, how they want to feel about this movie. It's one of the most subjective films I think ever made, because you're going to add a lot to it, like paintings. You look at the painting and you try to understand what the artist was doing, but you give your own feelings about it. It's about feeling. Fantasia's all about feeling, and in that way, it's a true art film. Because it doesn't give you the answers to all the things that are inside of it. It doesn't over-explain things. It doesn't hold your hand through any of it. It just shows you these things and expects the audience to be smart enough to get it. And that's the greatest part about this movie, is that it never condescends to the audience. It never talks down to the audience. It never panders. It always plays things very seriously. It takes itself seriously, more so than a lot of other animated films. And I can't think of another animated film that goes this far into the abstract. Even really great animated films that are huge epics, like a Nausicaa or a Akira. Just plenty of great animated films I've seen that are great. But this film, to me, it's in a league of its own, quite frankly, because of the time it was made, the people who were working on it, how talented they were, Disney's vision for it, the way all of these things came together, the musical choices. It really gives you a feeling of what cinema can be in about the mid 20th century, and it shows you where cinema was going from the 40s on into the 50s and the 60s, and really, it's just so far ahead of its time, it blows your mind it came out in 1940. Every time I watch it, I'm like, this came out in 1940? Because it flows in such a modern way. The editing feels very modern. That's what a lot of people do. It's not just the quality of the animation and the detail and the sweeping nature of it all. It's the flow and pace of this film. Like I said, that it influenced the music video. There's a way that things just sync up with the timing of the animation and music that's seamless. You never even think about it. It feels like the music was written for the animation. Now, we know the animation was done for the music, but when you're watching it, you kind of forget that these are compositions by these great composers from back in the day that have passed on. and you're listening to their terrific music, at a Fantasia takes this classic music that is legendary, that is, the holy grail of music, and it makes its own thing with it in a way a lot of movies haven't. It takes these classical pieces and does its own thing with it. It redefines them. It gives them a visual to go with how we hear them, and that visual reinforces ideas of what your mind is like. You know, when you close your eyes and there's that darkness, and then sometimes there's this kind of these colors. I not like color, but there's kind of your head starts to get a little. You start to imagine things. You start to really think about things. Maybe you might even fool yourself that you see something, and it's like when you see something in the shadows. Sometimes when you're a kid in bed and you get scared because you watched a scary horror movie. Fantasia gives out all these feelings. It brings out fear if you want to be scared by it. It brings out exhilaration. It brings out happiness, joy, cynicism, any kind of emotion you want to get from it. The movie's going to give you the opportunity to come out with that feeling. So and you'll see works by filmmakers like David Lynch who do this, and I'm a big fan of his work. And there's a lot of filmmakers that do that, but you rarely, like I said, have seen this in animation. And the fact that a major studio like Disney made this is incredible. And the fact that they took the risk with this thing, and it didn't pay off at first. It took a long time for this to pay off, but they wanted it to be this special thing. Disney basically wanted to create the ultimate experience with this, where you had the music coming in and the images and all those things. We all like interactive experience. We all like to go to Broadway. We all like concerts. He wanted to really capture that through animation. Now, that the experiment probably didn't really pay off in retrospect, and even Fantasia 2000 didn't do that great. It cost a lot of money and didn't make that much more than its budget, and got okay reviews. Although I still would like to see multiple Fantasia films. I wish every 10 years Disney would let the animators who work there do a bunch of shorts and they would do a new Fantasia, because I think it's an idea that can keep being made over and over again with the passing of animation, because the quality of the animation is going to get better. So it would have been a great series to see in like the 70s and then the 90s and then now, and see how things have changed, even subtly, but in major ways. Because the one thing about Fantasia 2000, the film is gorgeous. There's amazing work on that film, and I really love that part of the film when I watch it. It's just an entertaining movie. The celebrity cameos don't help, like, at all. They're really bad. Fantasia doesn't suffer from a lot of that. You actually feel like it's richer because you're getting this human interaction. They're coming back to connect with you, to give you a little breather, like, hey man, it's all right. And it gives this comedic element to it. It brings levity to it. It makes it familiar and fun. It feels more like a movie, and it doesn't weigh it down. Like, it would have been, this movie can be really weighed down by just all of itself, like what's happening, all the moving pieces, all the different ideas from different animators, some dancing mushrooms, which is one of my favorite sequences ever. And that you have so much happen here. It's just, I mean, really, that first 20 minutes, I can't oversell it. That first 20 minutes, once it starts, it just doesn't stop. It's just one hit after another. It's like, oh my god. And there's, and the ending's just one of the greatest looks at death and horror and life, and maybe the silence of the gods and angels, and maybe the evil that does live on earth, the evil that is manifested from mankind, that's hidden within. There's so many things in this film that really tap into that, those things that we all kind of feel in the air that we think are out there. But Fantasia, without trying to write it all out and give you this great novel, this piece of literature, it goes for the idea, and Walt Disney goes for the idea, that these things can be expressed simply through feeling. You can express these complex and dense ideas through just feelings and imagery. And if you can get the audience connected on that basic level that we all get connected on day-to-day lives, just seeing the sky and the color of things, and hearing a car, when somebody honks their car, you hear it and you're like, oh yeah, I got to stop at this red light or something. Everything signals us. So the idea with Fantasia is, well, how far can you push that? How many things can you put on the screen? And how coherent can it be? What's fascinating about this is how coherent it is. It's an extremely cohesive film in that way. The shorts, not only, except for, like I said, one or two, they complement each other. There's like a building happening with this film. You have the foundation, and everything keeps coming on top of that until you have this beautiful skyscraper that is fully realized as you see it. When you see that skyscraper, you see it as a whole. You don't think about all the pieces that came up to build it. That's how it is with Fantasia. When you view it as a film, it's so overwhelming as a whole that you forgot about all the elements, the small ones that really made it what it was. I think 2001, actually, Kubrick's film, is very similar to this, and that's a comparison a lot of people don't make. But when you watch that film, it's a lot of imagery that has meaning to it with these long musical sequences. That's very much like Fantasia in the 40s. I watched these films like a week within each other one time, and I was like, man, these are actually very similar movies. In the way that they use music and images to really convey things and ideas, because the director respects the audience's intelligence once again, which is what's I think why this film is held up, is that it's not just for little kids, is that it's not just sentimental or goofy, which I don't mean that to be a pun, but it's not goofy, it's not over the top, uh, it's not campy. Fantasia's pure. It's pure cinema. It's what films can do and a few other mediums can do, be it comic books or literature or television. What a movie can do in the medium of 90 minutes to 2 hours, if everyone working on it really puts all they have into it, and just the creative mammoth that can come out of that kind of collaborative process. I mean, you have these geniuses of classic Disney there, and you just have all this ambition, all this need to create, and that need is constantly coming out. This movie makes you want to create when it's over. It makes you want to go out and do something with your life. It makes you experience things in a new way. Every time you watch it, especially, you kind of feel things a little different. At least I think so. I actually think this film holds up remarkably well to repeat viewings. Fantasia is never necessarily about what it's about it's about what it is. It's never like plot, character, themes necessarily. Like there's no overarching theme. It's more about just what it is, taking the movie on its own merits as a piece of experimentation. So something that really hadn't been done before it, at least on this scale, certainly. I'm still in love with it. When it came on Netflix, I watched it. I still think it's great. I own a Blu-ray copy of it, which was very expensive. Actually, it was very tough to get a copy of Fantasia for a while, and it's something I couldn't recommend more. I really have no criticisms that I want to go into about it, besides the nitpicks I pointed out. But if you take it as a whole, like I said with the building, it's one of the greatest achievements in the medium, and it's honestly in a lot of ways the argument for the medium, especially at that time for 2D animation, for what it can do that maybe regular cinema, until special effects caught up with it, couldn't really capture. And that was the feeling of dreams, of the colors and images in your mind, of ideas, where the creative juices come from, where ideas come from, where paintings come from. It's like you're watching a painting happening live, like it's being painted in front of you live to the music. Now that's not what happened, but that's how it feels. That's the illusion and charm of Fantasia, is that it takes you through the journey of the creative process, beat by beat by beat by beat. And most of Disney's work, almost all of it, is filled with cynicism. It's filled with classic fantasy stories, or classic stories that come from literature, and that are or myths that have been told forever. I mean, everything in Disney, it has a certain kind of, it feels like a committee made it. Not everything, but a lot of their stuff does really feel manufactured in a way. Fantasia suffers from none of that. It feels like it's being made as it happens. It feels like it's exploding off the screen to you when it's happening, and that's something I haven't seen many movies do. And other animated films outside of maybe a couple others, I don't think have ever reached this level of excellence in the medium of cinema. I don't think they've ever reached this level of ambition, of quality within that. A lot of animated films do not like ambiguity. They like to explain everything to you for the most part. And I'm not saying that as a criticism, but even great animated films, they like to tell you what they are for the most part. Themes are very easy to get across, what the characters' goals are, their relationships with other characters. There's just a format to animation. Maybe it's because a lot of people, especially in the States, try to focus it towards children. And sometimes you'll see with Japanese anime and films by, like, let's say, Pixar in the States, they'll really break out from that and will become works of art. That, like Wall-E, for instance, is a very good example of an American animated film that has some art to it, especially in the first part. In Fantasia, it doesn't even try to do this. Fantasia just tells you up front, this is an experiment, go with it, and it takes the risk, and it asks you to go down this road with it. It asks you to accept the challenge of taking in Fantasia, of just jumping into this world of Disney, of pure Disney. Because there's always been the great Disney escapism when they take you to a place you never thought you could go, and they really open up your mind in new ways and show you the magic of just that Disney style. But Fantasia is not a film that necessarily challenges the heart constantly. It challenges the mind, and it makes one think when they watch it. And that's something that I think is worthy of praise and holding on to. So it's easily my 14th favorite film of all time. And I think it's going to stay on this list. I don't think it's going to get knocked off anytime soon. And I can't wait to show people Fantasia years to come. Because I think it's one of the best arguments, like I said before, for the medium itself of animation in cinematic form. And I think it's Walt Disney's masterpiece. So, like, comment, and subscribe. Tell me your opinion. I want to know what you guys think about Fantasia, what you like about it, what you don't like about it. What's your favorite Disney movie? And we'll move on to number 13 after this. So I'll see you guys next time.